Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to everyone around the country and around the world. Thank you for joining us today. I am Esteban. I'm your host, and this is the Esteban Hour podcast. We are so excited today. We are so excited. We have a special guest over from the Midas Touch Network, a decorated veteran by the name of Fred Wellman. Um, Words can't express how I feel about this gentleman who has reached so many successes and so many things in his lifetime. And that's what we're sitting down today and talking about his military experience, his experience going to West Point Academy and also Harvard, not to mention his work and contribution on the fabulous Midas Touch Network. But first, I thought I'd get into a little bit of what the military is all about. Um, we received some questions on what the military is, and we figured we'll answer your questions. Now, we all know that the military can greatly vary depending on what country you're in or what branch of service. However, common aspects of the military include a strong emphasis on discipline, training, teamwork, and a commitment to serving and protecting one's country, and in our case, the great United States of America. Military personnel often go through vigorous and physical mental training to prepare for their roles. They may be deployed domestically or internationally. And when they're deployed, they carry out a variety of missions, including defense, peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, and combat operations. The military also carries various career paths and opportunities for personal and professional health. Fred was a Black Hawk pilot. The military is primarily about protecting and defending our country's national interest, including us, citizens, territories where we live, and values. It serves as the armed forces of a nation and is responsible for maintaining our security, deterring aggression, and, if necessary, engaging in combat operations, defending our fabulous country. The military also plays a role in peacekeeping, disaster responses, humanitarian assistance, and both domestically and internationally, the military does this. Also, the military offers a structured and disciplined environment for personal and professional development, fostering leadership skills and providing opportunities for education and training. Now, some ask, what is West Point Academy about? Well, the West Point Academy, of which Fred went to, is officially known as the United States Military Academy, or USMA, short for it. It's a prestigious institution that's located in West Point, New York, and it's one of the most renowned military academies in the world. West Point's primary mission is to educate, train, and inspire future leaders of the United States Army, and Fred Wellman is one of them. The Academy offers a vigorous 4-year undergraduate program that combines academic instruction with military training. West Point's cadets receive a comprehensive education in various fields such as humanities and sciences, engineering, social sciences, and they also undergo vigorous physical training, believe it or not, and participate in military drills to develop leadership skills, discipline, and teamwork. It's absolute awesomeness. The ultimate goal of West Point is to produce officers who are not only academically proficient, but also possess the leadership skills necessary to serve as effective military leaders. Now, once they graduate, cadets are commissioned as officers in the U.S. Army and go on to serve in various leadership roles, both combat and non-combat. Now, we also got a question, what is Harvard about? So Harvard, or heard that name Harvard, Harvard University is also a prestigious institution, but is located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's one of the most renowned universities in the world. It was founded back in 1636, and its primary mission is to provide a world-class education to advance knowledge through research and scholarship. It offers a wide range of undergraduate and graduate programs across various disciplines, and that includes the arts, that includes sciences, engineering, business. There's a Harvard Business School that includes law, medicine, education, public health. Yes, this university is definitely known for its vigorous academic standards. It has a distinguished faculty and its emphasis on critical thinking and intellectual exploration. We all love Harvard. And again, we are honored to share together with Mr. Fred Wellman's success and experience to a lot of young men out there who may not know what to do in their future, who are stuck in between, should I go to the military, should I not? We're going to speak with Fred on that. He's going to give you his take on what he thinks is best. Let's see. But before we bring Mr. Wellman in, let's bring in our co-host from the Esteban Hours Weekend Review, which airs on Monday at 11 a.m. He's the co-producer as well and co-creator, Mr. Jeremy Baker. Hey, Jeremy.
What is going on? Thanks for having me on this one. I'm nervous. I'm never nervous before a show. This time I was actually a little bit nervous. I'll admit, Fred, I reached out to Fred because of the Midas Touch Network. And then after Fred agreed, then I started reading his resume a little bit, and I'm like, ooh, okay. All right. But no, I thank you for letting me I'm just honored to be part of this right now. So I'm so happy.
You got it. And I wouldn't have it no other way but to share this moment with you. I'm excited just as you. We've gotten so many comments of great thoughts for Fred. It seems like he has a large fan base and many who adore him. This gentleman, okay, we already said he's a retired officer from the U.S. Army Rangers, right? He served two wars, one in Desert Storm and one in Iraq, over a 22-year span. He flew out combat missions. He was a Black Hawk pilot. We all know or recognize the Black Hawk helicopters, right, from movies.
One of my favorite movies of all time, man. Black Hawk Down.
So, yeah, absolutely. Black Hawk Down. He's a graduate of the West Point Academy and Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He is a former member of the Lincoln Project, and he is a current contributor to the great Midas Touch Network. So, without further ado, everyone help me welcome and join in Mr. Fred Wellman.
Who the hell are you guys talking about? I don't know what you guys are talking about. Okay, let's set these things right. I did go to West Point. I graduated 600th out of 900 people in my class, was in the top 2/3. And extrapolate. And then I went to Harvard. Well, that was because of the Army, but it worked out pretty well. So don't be impressed.
It doesn't matter. You went to Harvard.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
I didn't go to Harvard.
I barely went to high school.
It was kind of funny. I actually applied. I applied when I was in Iraq. And right, I think it was my second tour in Iraq, third combat tour. And I got this idea to go there for grad school. And my boss at the time, a guy named General Petraeus, it's real big on his people having grad school. And so I applied. The Army laughed. Like, first of all, anybody that knows me knows I'm kind of an idiot. And they're like, oh, yeah, good luck with that. And I got in. and the Army is like, oh, shit. we had to send you there. So, yeah, anyway, it was pretty funny.
That's great.
Awesome. All right, let's get right into it.
Woo! Okay,
Um,
let's hit it.
my first question to you is going to start at the very beginning.
Okay.
What was your childhood like?
I grew up. I'm actually back in my hometown. I grew up in outside of St. Louis, Missouri. My
Mm.
dad is a Marine Corps veteran of World War II.
Oh, nice.
There was a sort of a military history in my family. We'd grown up, with sort of the military. Even though he long before I was born, but that military discipline. We laugh if you know any Marines in your life, former Marines, they're always Marines. It's just it's a bit of a running joke. He still uses all terminology, but I grew up sort of in the shadow of World War II veteran, understanding the nature of that. So I was always very interested. I grew up regular life. We were, suburban kid life, riding around town on my bike, normal life. All my brother, I'm the last of 4 kids. All my brothers and sisters my sister went to the University of Missouri, Mizzou, we call it here in Missouri. And I was the rebel. I was a little bit of a gap, about 6-year gap between me and them. And as I started getting ready for high school to leave, I was a sports guy. I was multi-sports, baseball, swimming, hockey, you name it. I ended up being mostly a swimmer in high school to focus my efforts in one athletic field. Very involved in my high school as far as like leadership, elected office in high school. Whatever you could think of, I was into it. And as I got ready for college, I was very interested in the military and had stumbled on. I always wanted to fly. That was my dream, was to fly. Here in Missouri and St. Louis, they still do. Actually, they built the F-18s, F-15s, so you kind of grew up in the shadow of these combat aircraft flying over you. And so I wanted to fly. And it's a funny story. We went to a college fair at the arena where the St. Louis Blues hockey team played. And I really want to go to the Air Force Academy. And I went to their booth and they were jerks. I tell the story often how the cadets there were kind of jerks. I'm like, that wasn't cool. And my dad's like, there's a West Point booth over there. This is 1982. The Army was just kind of, Reagan had just taken office, was kind of coming back. And there was nobody standing at the West Point booth in the Army. And I went over and the Army guy's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. I want to fly. Like, well, we got aircraft. We have more aircraft in the Air Force. Like, really? Like, yeah, we got more boats than the Navy. Like, well, that's weird. And then they're like, what do I have to major in? Because the other academies, you got to major in certain things, oceanic or, engineering and all. And they're like, whatever you want, dude. We don't care. Because at the end, you're going to graduate, be an officer in the Army. I'm like, cool. And, so once, another example of applying for something and absolutely no one thought I'd get in, and I got in the military academy. And so I left Kirkwood, Missouri, and shipped off to West Point, New York to get screamed at and yelled at. And I joke off. And then I was actually just there this week. I was there yesterday. I flew in today from West Point. A dear friend of mine, Senator Elizabeth Dole, was getting an award from the academy. She invited me to attend. But I got there, and it was a weird fit for me. I'm not. You describe all those things the military does, highly disciplined and all. I'm like, I'm not that guy. I don't like getting up early, during basic training. I almost quit during basic training. And my squad leader is like, dude, you're like way too nice to be here. I'm like, I know. And I was going to quit. And he says, let me tell you, man. He goes, let me do you a favor. He goes, hang in there in a couple of weeks. We go out, we start shooting our weapons, we start blowing shit up. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds great. And he goes, you'll dig it. And I did. I love that part. The Army part, going out, leading soldiers, scooting through the woods, conducting tactical operations. I love that part. So once I got into Army stuff, it kind of helped carry me through West Point. And that's how I ended up. So that's how I'm in the Army. I ended up doing 20 years.
Awesome. Nice. Awesome. Listen, I don't even, it doesn't even matter to me if you went to West Point and did absolutely nothing. The point is that you were there, you walked through those halls, it is on your resume, and only us can only dream of being there. And Harvard.
Yeah, it's an interesting experience. I mean, West Point's such a unique place. I mean, it's America. They recruit from all 50 states. That's the whole point. To go there, you're nominated by your member of Congress. So each member of Congress can nominate someone. Wow. It's a public school. It is technically a public school. It's the number one public. It's been rated off and on as the number 1, number 2 public school in the country, if not the world. And it's a remarkable place, but your tax dollars pay for it. Over 200 years or some 200 years of history. It's an interesting place. It's a very unique place of America. It's very American. And you're very aware of your legacy when you go there. They call it the long gray line. The cadets wear gray uniforms, and you know, and you feel that when you're there. You feel that you're a member of something very important.
Nice.
And just leading to something. And, you know, it was the Cold War. So there was always that hanging over us of the potential hot war in Europe, for example. And certainly didn't expect to go to, you know, Iraq, like over and over and over. That wasn't the plan, but no, it's a great experience. I recommend it for anybody. I mean, again, I was just a kid from Kirkwood, Missouri. I hadn't traveled that much back and forth to New Jersey Shore to visit family, but certainly nothing like that. And here I am at West Point. I find myself a couple years in down in Panama at jungle school. I actually wrote a story about it for my Substack. I wrote on my Substack how I had resisted the Army until I was at jungle school in Panama, and we were doing this obstacle course, and it at one point it dumps you out into the Caribbean on this rock shelf in the water, and you have to run around this beach and climb back up into the jungle. And I remember I hit that water, and there's this old Spanish fort over there, and I'm looking out at the ocean, and I'm like, oh man, this is cool. I'm a kid from Missouri, and I'm standing in the Caribbean, you know, with a bunch of soldiers. Like, oh, okay. And I tell myself my military career how many times that happened, standing in front of the pyramids in Egypt for training when I did training exercise there, or driving through snow in Germany, bar hopping in Germany. You know, I just, for a kid from Missouri, for anybody, you know, it offers you an opportunity to see the world in a unique way. Certainly, of course, I didn't expect to go to war as much as I did, but that goes with it too.
All right. Okay. So, we got to bring out some comments because we have 1 million comments here for you, Fred.
Okay.
And we just started the show.
Thanks.
First, Paul says, hello, Fred, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul, it's my middle name.
And Paul also said something else that identified with you too. Here he goes. Paul says his father's originally from Kirkwood, Missouri.
It's my hometown, man. I live like a few miles away right now.
No kidding.
I grew up in Greenbrier Country Club, Greenbrier subdivision. So yeah. What year did you go to high school? I'm class of 1983. That's a big thing in St. Louis, you guys. So there's a St. Louis thing where everybody asks you what high school you went to. It's a really unique, weird freaking St. Louis thing. So, I mean, even in my 50s, people go, "Oh, hey, you're from here? Like, what high school did you go to?" Like, really? We care about that still? But okay, Kirkwood. But
it's a small town thing. I live in a small city.
I don't know. Yeah, I came back. I just moved back home to St. Louis 2 years ago, and I'm still kind of like, really? We still give a shit about what high school we went to?
Well, Norma, which we answered already, but Norma asked, how long were you in the military?
I did 22 years, and I had a unique run. Because I did, I think it was actually one of the later questions we'll get, but I came out of Army. So it's actually a little bit more complex than what you mentioned it. So when I came out, I got commissioned as an aviator, which means I was going to, in the branches, you can be infantry, you can be armor, you can be whatever. I ended up being an aviator, which means my focus was flying and military aviation operations. Initially, I went to Fort Rucker. I ended up being flying Scout helicopters. So I did scouts in Desert Storm for Apaches, the big left hook in Desert Storm. I was the lead scout for an Apache unit where we were attacking the Iraqi armored columns. And then I ended up being a staffer. I actually got out at 13 years, which is unusual when you're that deep into your career. But I was kind of frustrated with the situation, and we were living in Atlanta. So I joined the reserves, and for a year and a half, and then 9/11 hit, and I got mobilized that day. I actually volunteered. I volunteered to go back in, and so I volunteered to go back in the Army because I knew we were going to have a war, and of course I did. So I ended up in Iraq 3 times. Between 2002 and 2009. And so I got back my last Iraq tour and decided to retire. So I ended up doing 22 full years in the Army, Black Scouts, and then I was in a Blackhawks, like I said, for Iraq. And then I ended up being a spokesman. After the first Iraq tour, I was on TV quite a bit. It's a story. But General Petraeus made me a spokesman. So I ended up being in the Army, kind of like PR flack. So I retired out of the Pentagon in 2010. So I did 22 full years. I'm retired with all the broken body parts to stand for it. But yeah,
okay.
Yeah, scars everywhere, fake knees, you name it.
and that's why America views you as a hero. We don't have the scars.
Definitely not a hero, but thank you.
Okay, so Jeremy's gonna ask a couple of questions.
Hit me
in regards to military service. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I'm ready. I'm braced.
Well, he already answered like half of my
nice.
questions.
I told you it was going to happen, Jeremy. How'd I get so good looking?
Good yeah, right. There you go. That's a good
genes.
I guess as somebody that grew up in the military, I was a terrible soldier myself, unfortunately.
Me too.
Because of being in a job that I did not want.
Right.
Because I initially went in for special forces, and when I failed to get through that, they put me into something fixing fuel pumps, and I had absolutely no interest in doing it. But growing up in the military, for me, I think a lot of my most of my core memories are of military life, and I absolutely loved it. So I think if you, I mean, do you recommend somebody? I guess if somebody's not going to college or anything like that, do you think the military, maybe they're lost in their life, the military is a good direction to go to give them that structure that they need?
Oh, I still do. My own son did. Yeah, my son, my oldest son, graduated. He struggled his way through high school a little bit. He's a cut up. He's just a wonderful, great kid, but just sort of wanders away through high school and I used to tease him that he got D's instead of F's because he was a nice kid, and the teacher's like, I'll give you a break. But he didn't want to go to college. He spent a year living at home with us after graduated, kind of floating around, and his friends are going off to college, and then a couple joined the military. And he came to me, what do you think about it? And asked, what do you think of joining the Army? I said, I love it. He ended up being a military policeman. And it gave him a lot of discipline. It gave him some structure in his life, gave him some job experience, believe it or not, gave him some real world experience, taught him how to be self-reliant and more disciplined. And then there's the benefits. He met a lovely woman, by the way, at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty. But also, he's got education benefits now. He's got the GI Bill and his veterans benefits, and he's doing very well. So, I mean, the military's got its challenges. We had 20 years of war. We used an all volunteer force to go to war for 20 years. There are challenges. Our barracks are falling down or moldy. Women I hate that so many of our soldiers who are women suffer military sexual assault or abuse. There's a lot of tough societal issues that affect our military, just like they do our society. But I still do believe that the military is a great place for young people to find a direction, find a path out of where they may be. I mean, look, I'm no exception. We talk big about the West Point Harvard thing. Look, y'all, I was a straight B student. I got lucky that West Point is the one academy that's not nuts about having straight A's. They're looking for the whole person thing, where the idea that you may be pretty smart. Can you lead? Are you healthy? That kind of thing. So, but I was going to go to the University of Missouri and just kind of wander around like my brothers, I was already pledged to fraternity, for God's sake. But what I found instead was a career of service, a tribe, and incredible benefits that I'm still to this day. I mean, I joke about my fake knees, but your tax dollars paid to get those replaced. I've been very fortunate. I mean, so it's a unique, I do believe very strongly the military is a great place for our men and women. We'd be lost without young men and women who are willing to step up and serve. It's hard, less than a third of Americans are even qualified to join the military, be it from health or criminal backgrounds or drugs, whatever it may be. Only about 1/3 of actual average young Americans can even join our service. So we desperately do need them still.
So you were trained to be a pilot, and you were trained on the Black Hawk helicopters. Mm-hmm. Is it once a pilot, always a pilot?
Yeah, I mean, I love being a pilot. I was pretty damn good at it. I joke about it. I mean, you have to be cocky to be a pilot, so I was pretty damn good at it. I found a nice fit, especially with the first actually aircraft I loved the most was the OH-58. It's called the Kiowa Scout. It was just a Scout helicopter. I remember this is the funny story. So we go to Fort Rucker, Alabama for training, and I'm driving on base, and they had there an airfield that had actual tactical unit on base. And this is a little crude story, so forgive me, viewers. And this is the 80s, so I can do it. Was the 80s. It was a different time. Anyway, we're driving on base, and there's these helicopters sitting there. And one of the, the Apache, the attack helicopter, you've seen them on TV, the wings, they blow stuff up. And then next to them, though, is these small little green helicopters with skids, low, only a foot off the ground. It looked like a shark, the OH-58 Kiowa. And I never, believe it or not, even with 4 years at West Point, I'd never been exposed to the 58. I'd never seen them anywhere. And I said to my buddy I was driving in with, I said, what are those? He goes, oh, those are OH-58s. That's the Air Scout. That's a Scout helicopter. I was like, really? He goes, yeah, interesting story about those, Fred. It's a true story. He says to me, she goes, no, it's a single pilot aircraft, but it has 2 seats. And you know why? I said, no. He goes, well, one seat is for the pilot and 1 seat's for his balls. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Yeah. I'm going to fly that because it's an unarmed scout helicopter, and your job in the 80s and the 90s was to fly in unarmed, sneak in behind enemy lines or wherever you may be, find the bad guys, and then bring guns on them. That's what I did in Desert Storm. I had a platoon of 4 aircraft. I lost 1, unfortunately, and that's what we did. That's what we did in the war. The big left hook was we would go out and sneak around. And I mean, when the last battles, we ended up stumbling onto the Iraqi advance. When after the ceasefire, we actually fought the last battle of Desert Storm. The Iraqi Hammurabi division had been trying to sneak out, and we bumped into them. They fired on my unit. General McCaffrey, the 20th, sent us in. I showed up with my 3 scouts and tanks as far as I could see, and brought the Apaches in and taught them a lesson. So no, I love being a pilot. I flew here when I first got to St. Louis. I took a helicopter ride when I first got to St. Louis, but I'm old now. I mean, the challenge though is, I loved it, and I love being a pilot. I was very good at scouts. I was a very good Black Hawk pilot, but it's not. I hate to say it, it's not a usable job skill, right? I mean, it's like there's only so many helicopters out there, and believe it or not,
it's just so cool.
Helicopter pilots don't get paid shit. So Okay. I had friends that got fixed wing pilot licenses and flew here. I got a friend. Matter of fact, one of my soldiers from Desert Storm was an enlisted man from Mexico. He was just a resident. And after we got back from Desert Storm, I helped him get a citizenship. And damnedest thing, he went in the Army, he stayed in the Army, became a warrant officer, became a pilot, ended up flying Gulfstream jets eventually, like the VIP aircraft. He retired from the Army after 28 years, a ridiculous amount, and now he's a Southwest Airlines pilot. And started off though as an immigrant from Mexico, and fought Desert Storm. Yeah, fought as Desert Storm with me as a and then a great American story. Such a great American story. Awesome. A kid from Mexico immigrated to America legally, got in the Army, fought in a war before he's even a citizen. And then he retired. Now he's flying the international Mexico route for Southwest because he speaks Spanish.
Awesome.
That's so cool.
Anyway,
all right, let's get to another question from
more questions.
Our faithful followers.
Okay.
Mike Love says, has there ever been orders you were given that you did not agree with and had to perform anyway? Great question.
Wow. Great question.
That's deep.
That's a tough question. I was fortunate not to experience that. I'll be very honest. Now it's funny how that goes, though. You do go in retro. I mean, let's be honest. The invasion of Iraq, there's some real questions around that. There's questions around the setup. Many of us who served in Iraq do kind of ask ourselves today, like, hey, did I serve in an illegal war? I mean, I was placed in a position to, kill. And, for a kid like me from Missouri, I'll be very honest with you guys. The people I know who have the most damage mentally were the ones who had to kill someone. It's very, and you lose men. I lost men. That's been part of my challenge, what they call survivor's guilt. But it's a very difficult decision when you're placed in that position where you have to actually execute, pull the trigger, bring fire like I did, which is bring fire from other aircraft upon your enemy, and keep your humanity at the same time.
Wow.
But I had some difficult challenge. I mean, I did things that were tough. I did things that were, there were times where I got in yelling fights. There was times where it's a tough business. You talk about life and death decisions that had to be made. I was never placed in a position where any of my leaders were the types who would place me in a place where I had to make an immoral, lawful order. But you're taught that. They teach our officers that to recognize when an order is an unlawful order, the process for disobeying an unlawful order. It's very key to our officer corps and the discipline that goes in the United States military is understanding when you're being placed in that position. But I never truly faced that. But it's not to say I didn't have some moments where I had to have some very strong words with people to avoid getting into a situation where that would happen.
Okay, all right.
I would like to. I guess I have to mention. I just want to. I guess that also depends on who's giving the orders at the top too.
Well, I mean, that was the fear, right? When we had Mr. Trump, when there was hints that he would deploy troops, we saw some stuff that happened. I don't know if you guys followed the Lafayette Square incident, where the National Guard was brought in. There was an incident after the Lafayette Square where it was cleared, where a National Guard helicopter came in, an ambulance helicopter, and they were brought into what we call dusting. It's the term dusting. When you dust civilians on the ground, it's like when you pull up next to somebody, when you pull pitch real hard, make the blades shoot a downwind, and it blows you. It'll blow people away. It's a riot control technique that is frowned upon, but you can literally blow people over with the helicopter. I did it. I did it one time. Oh, it was a war story for you. So after the ceasefire, in Desert Storm, my co-pilot, I had a young enlisted man as my aerial observer, we called him, and he and I are flying some reconnaissance missions. As we returned from reconnaissance mission, I stumbled upon some young American soldiers posing with dead body, which is not cool and technically illegal. And they were just had the time of their lives taking pictures of this dead body. So I took it upon myself. So I rolled up on them and pulled pitch real hard and just created this giant dust cloud and sent them running. And so what happened after Lafayette Square was they used a ambulance helicopter in downtown DC to pull up on some people who were in the streets, protesters, and dust them using the helicopter blades. And that was a violation of a number of regulations, aviation regulations specifically, but also use of military force. And they used an ambulance helicopter, which, the idea that a aircraft with a red cross on the side of it would roll up on civilians and use the power to kind of. So there were some real moments there where a lot of us, I mean, I went nuts. I think I was already with the Lincoln Project then, and I went just absolutely nuts with it. I was like, this is just outrageous. I was very, very critical of the chain of command that made that decision. So yeah, I mean, it's a constant battle. We have to make sure we're not being asked to do illegal things. If you look at General Milley to this day is still apologizing for walking across Lafayette Square with President Trump, giving the appearance that the military was supporting an attack on at that time peaceful protesters. So it's tough business, man. It's a tough business.
Yeah.
All right. Vita Talks says, "Good evening, Fred."
Hi.
We love Vita.
Hi, Vita.
Norma wants to know, what did your dad do in the military?
Yeah, he was a Marine. He's a kid. My dad lied about his age to get in the Marine Corps at the end of World War II. He got there very late. He was late in it. He actually was very late. He was like 1944. It's kind of funny. I joke all the time that I rejoined after 9/11 so I could go to Afghanistan and fight Al-Qaeda. I ended up in Iraq 3 times. My dad joined to fight the Japanese and ended up in Puerto Rico. But interesting guy. He was actually a mechanic on a Corsair helicopter aircraft. The F-4U Corsair, the gull-winged aircraft, Marine attack aircraft. My dad ended up being a sergeant mechanic in a squadron based in Puerto Rico, of all places. So he actually didn't see combat as a Marine.
All right. This one here is a special question.
Okay.
Galliano, he wants to know, as a veteran, do you feel America has your best interests at heart?
I spent we skipped a part of my bio. So after I retired from the Army, I was a veterans advocate for 10 years. I started a firm called Scout Comms, and it was a public relations and advocacy firm focused specifically on veterans issues. So we helped companies and nonprofits and even the government handle veterans issues and work with them. And I saw a transition from the beginning of that 2010 to and in many ways where we had been ignored. There is this common belief that veterans are ignored or they're not treated, or, oh God, we got homeless veterans. I'm going to bust that bubble. Overall, veterans have come a long way in the last 10 years. We are well taken care of. When I first started my company, veteran unemployment was twice the civilian unemployment. For the last 5 to 7 years. Actually, no, under Obama. For 10 years, the veteran unemployment rate has been half the civilian population. There's so many programs and efforts and so many companies recognize that veterans bring a unique skill set to their companies, that they're being hired in higher numbers. The veteran unemployment rate has not exceeded the civilian rate in ages. And that's a great sign. It shows you, to me, that America understands the value of what the veteran experience is. By the same token, there's challenges. There's no question. Our healthcare system is challenging. But I say a lot, you guys, veterans and the military are nothing but a subset of the United States. We are an all-volunteer force. So the things we go through, we come from America, we come from the average American and the experience we have. And that means PTSD. Everybody thinks PTSD is uniquely veteran. I have PTSD. And I was diagnosed about a few years ago. I resisted the idea that I had it. Now, in retrospect, it's stupid that I thought that. But mental health care is hard to get, but for everybody, your average civilian can't see a mental health care provider for 30, 60, 90 days. There's just not enough of them. And veterans have that experience too. Healthcare is always going to be a challenge for us. We have unique health challenges. Now we've got this exposure to toxins that, several of my bosses all end up having cancer, strange cancers that they shouldn't have had. So there's definitely things. I think overall, though, we're very well respected by the American people, that we've been very well taken care of the last 10 years. I think that continues. I do worry about politics. Things have definitely changed in the last 5 years as different political factions have tried to use veterans as their own sort of cudgel, if you will, or, a hammer, both good and bad. And it's funny because there's this belief, there's actually organizations formed that thought, if we get more veterans elected to Congress, it'll bring back the good old days, from the 70s, when the congeniality of the veterans who served together in World War II and Korea, they would work together in a bipartisan way. And I remember saying, y'all, that's not how it works anymore. I mean, that's not the reason they got along was because it was the fucking 70s. Okay. It wasn't because they were veterans, And sure enough, look at us now. You got these MAGA guys, Dan Crenshaw, you got Eli Crane, who's, a Navy SEAL, and and there's lots of lefty veterans, so it's the idea that just being a veteran will make us better. I'm going to burst your bubble. We're just we're regular Americans. We're crazy. We're difficult. We cuss too much. So to answer the question, which is a great question, I can only speak for Fred Wellman. Fred Wellman, feel very, very well taken care of. Feel very well respected. And that goes for everywhere. It's funny. When I went to Harvard, man, people were like, "Oh shit, you're going to Harvard? That's lefties, liberals." When I went to Harvard, they still had no ROTC program. Harvard had banned the ROTC program during Vietnam. They didn't have ROTC there. Oh my God, you're going to that lefty liberal bastion. They're going to spit on you. Oh my God. Completely the freaking opposite, man. I was treated like a king, man. I had everything. I was invited to classes. Like the professors would recruit us to come to their class, like give our perspective. And then you got a guy like me who at that point had already done 2 Iraq tours. We're talking 2006. And I out of the 3 years we've been in Iraq, I've been there for 2 of them. And they really wanted to hear about that. They wanted my perspective. So yeah, it's funny. I can't tell you how many of my military friends like, oh my God, they're gonna treat you like shit. I was like, man, I was treated like a king. I graduated with honors, for God's sake. They gave me an award. They gave me a full scholarship. So yeah, every time I hear that, the lefties hate you, like, no, man, they're great. I love them.
Now, you had recently just brought up veterans and homelessness. So I felt the need to might as well just show this comment from one of our viewers. Norma says, what do you think about the homeless veterans issue? Do you feel it's the veterans' fault for those that are capable of acquiring work? What about how the U.S. takes care of disabled veterans?
It's 3 questions, really. So
yes,
homelessness is an issue in America. Homeless veterans are a subset of the larger issue, right? We are. You guys are going to be shocked. Want to hear a shocking number? There's only about 15 million veterans in America. We make up less than 7%. Actually, we make up less than 7% of the population at this point. As the older generation passes away, that number is shrinking by the day, literally by the day. There was a point, I think we were losing World War II veterans at 30,000 a month at one point. Most of them are gone now. So, and we're not replacing veterans. Even the total number, 20 years of war, I think the total number of global war on terror veterans total is somewhere around, I want to say 6 million at most. I haven't checked in a while, but it's not that many people compared to World War II, where you had 25 million. So the veteran population is a smaller subset than most people think. as far as homeless veterans, like anyone, the challenge is not as simple as not being able to get a job. It's not as simple as being a drug addict or a mental health problem.
Right.
Those are many that more often than not, if someone's homeless, there is a mental health challenge. There is a difficult challenge. They've fallen on hard times. There's no question about that. It's not as simple as giving them a house. They need supportive services.
There,
I'm actually on the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans is a client of mine for 10 years. 11 technically. I'm on the Capital Committee for the Veteran Community Project here in St. Louis, which is building actually tiny home village for them. But it's not just giving them a home. What makes the project special is they're offering wraparound services, budgeting, counseling, mental health counseling, VA healthcare. So look, the veteran experience with homelessness, the veteran experience with being disabled, it mirrors the American. We're very, very fortunate that most Americans care about what's happening to us, though, right? So in many ways, we're fortunate that way. I believe the VA has come a very, very long way. That started under President Obama. Mr. Obama, I actually was just with his VA secretary last night, Bob McDonald, incredible leader. So the VA is much better than it was. Not to say it's perfect. I'm not gonna say that, but it's come a long way.
It's perfect.
So
I can vouch for that. It really has.
Yeah, Obama. I mean, God, they did a lot of good shit. I mean, I was a Republican when he took office, and they really did some good stuff. And so, having said all that, no, I mean, homelessness. I don't blame any for being homeless. I mean, I live in a world where, again, I've had some mental health challenges. They did affect my life. They affected my business. They affected the people around me. I'm divorced for a reason. Because I was a dick, and I've recovered since then. But having said that, there's a big part of me just says, there by the grace of God go I. Look, it could be me, y'all. I mean, there's been times. I'll show you my tattoo. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a tattoo that says "I'm not done yet." It's my motto. It was the theme of my retirement speech.
Awesome.
And the reason I have that is to remind me of the many. I lost a wife and child in a car accident. I lost two men in combat, and I was 25 years old. I've had some challenges faced. I've seen combat. I've lost dear friends. My interpreter in Iraq was beheaded on camera. I've seen some very, very terrible things. And so, look, if that doesn't affect you, in some way, then I don't know what you're made of if that doesn't affect you.
That's right.
So I think we owe our fellow citizens some grace and some support when they struggle.
And so when they say that, veterans suffer from PTSD, it is definitely nothing to take lightly.
But many Americans do. I mean, PTSD can come from car accidents. A victim of crime.
Right. No, I understand that, but I point out, especially for veterans, because the things that you see or have seen are not the normal average things or accidents that we all see. Like you just mentioned, your interpreter's head being cut off. That must be emotionally devastating.
Well, we've come to understand this. In the old days, PTSD was usually the trauma part where maybe you got blown up or something like that, and there was a growth of an understanding of what the trauma meant. And in the last 10 to 15 years, we've also come to understand that what we call survivor's guilt, which is the idea that I sent two of my men were killed on a mission that we argued over who would fly it. I lost the argument. They flew it. They died. I didn't. That is a unique thing to take with you for life. And is it trauma? I don't know. They say it is. It manifests in certain ways. PTSD for many of my peers, there was that myth for a long time, like Rambo, or we want to kill people. And there's always this, whenever there's a murder, when a veteran's involved in the crime, we go, oh, I bet he had PTSD. And the joke amongst us veterans is that the only people most veterans with PTSD want to hurt themselves. It's not like that, so, the burden you carry. But again, there's treatment. It's not a permanent disability. It doesn't have to be a permanent disability. I'm living proof of that. Right. I went to therapy. There's some incredible treatments we've discovered, EMDR, and they've got immersion therapy now. There's some unique things that are being tested. There's even a shot now that has shown some promise where they put a certain drug in the brainstem that actually helps. I mean, there's really remarkable stuff being done to help people kind of recover. I had a dear friend who had really bad. I mean, that guy was really bad. I picked him up off the streets of DC one day because he thought he was being surveilled by the CIA, and he jumped in the backseat of my car. Yeah, true story. Jumped in the backseat of my car and hid in the backseat of my car while I drove him out of DC one day. that young man had a shot and some treatment, and he's doing very, very well now. So it's not a permanent, there are treatments and there's ways. And if we support, we believe that you can be better. Like I said, I'm living proof of it. I had debilitating PTSD. It was tough.
All right. So what advice or guidance or encouragement would you give to the next generation of young men? And it could be within the military realm or civilian.
I'm real fortunate. I've got 4 kids. Two boys, 2 girls. They're adults now. It's 2 men and 2 women with their own kids. I got 4 of their own. I'm very blessed to work with a lot of Gen Z young men and women. I'm an advisor in an organization called Voters Tomorrow, which is a activist group for Gen Zers, 18, 20, 25, 26 years old. Nice. And what I love about this generation, this young generation, is they see. One of the things I point out when I have interviews on this topic is that this generation has grown up plugged in. When I was 16, my community was Kirkwood, Missouri, and how far my bike went or my car in that community. Kids today, they have communities that stretch across international borders. For many years, my youngest son who was playing Xbox, his best Xbox buddy was a kid in Germany. That's a very unique perspective for those, that's just a unique perspective of what world means. And that's why I love this generation is they do feel that we've had surveys done where they talk about when I vote, I'm voting because my friend is gay and is having his rights taken away. I'm voting because my friend's cousin in California or Texas can't get an abortion now, and she got real sick. It's just they're much remarkably aware, and I love that, and I encourage that. I want them to be aware there's a world beyond where they are, and to keep that in mind as they can make a difference in the world. We're very, very fortunate to have a young generation that does want to make a difference and does want to be a part of it. But there's so much opportunity out there, and it's hard to get. With the Gen Zers. We joke about it a lot that the millennials and Gen Zers, the trophy generation or whatever, the participation trophy. And I always say, well, they didn't buy the freaking trophies we did. The participation trophy generation is X and boomers who bought the trophies. It wasn't the kids that got them. And so these are kids who need to hear their value is yet to be achieved, and they have potential to change the world. And I'm excited. I'm excited to hand it off to them because God knows we fucked it up.
Okay. Roseanne says, how did you feel about leaving the Army?
Which time? I quit twice. I only took once. I quit twice. Didn't take the first time. The first time at 13 years in 2000, it was really hard. It defined my life at that point. We weren't at war. I'd been to war already, so I felt I'd done my duty at that. And it was a little bit tough. There was no programs back in 2000 to help veterans find jobs, so I had to find my own. But I had a very successful transition. I found a job. I went from the Army to my new job, same week. But it's such a big part of your life. Second time, it's funny, when I retired in 2010, I did a little freaking happy dance out of the Pentagon. I moonwalked my ass out of the Pentagon because at that point I had done my duty. My body was broken. At that point, I already knew my knees were shot. I already had my left foot rebuilt. I stepped in a hole. My injuries are so sexy. I think I stepped in a hole in Iraq and popped the joint out of it. Never got it fixed. So it ended up being, my foot literally disassembled. None of my injuries are sexy. They're just stupid. But I never got blown up. I don't know. It was a bit of a joke actually in combat that everybody wanted me to go on missions with them because nothing ever happened with me. If I went on a convoy, I was the good luck charm. Yeah, nothing. It was a right. Literally, I did a mission to Samara in northern Iraq. We actually went with these special forces guys and interrogated terrorists. It's a story. And the way back, we drove back in broad daylight. The special ops guys like, look, you need to get some metal. I don't know what metal was. Great. And they're literally trying to draw a fire and nothing. We roll into the greens and what the hell? I'm like, dude, that's just it. Nothing happens to me.
That's hilarious.
But I digress. But I did 3 combat tours. I came back with 4. And I came back. You start to feel like your luck's going to run out at some point. The day before I arrived at my unit, a rocket came in and killed 2 guys in the gym. Just standing on the goddamn guy got killed on the stair stepper when a rocket came over from Solder City and went through the gym. So you kind of the hooch they put me in when I arrived in the green zone for my third tour. The hooch next door was still smoking from getting blown up. So you're kind of like, shit, man. It's like just the law of averages says eventually my ass is gonna get blown up, and so there was that, and then the effect of Iraq, especially for me being involved with the local populace the way I was. I both my first tour, I helped them build. I built schools. We built clinics. I built a clinic. The doctor I built the clinic for ended up being murdered in it later. I was very intense with Iraq. I even when I was home, I was on the computer, look at the casualty reports, look at the reports, anything I could find out about I used to look at Google Earth to see if my village was still occupied. And at one point it wasn't because because of the Islamic State chased them all out. So when I came back from that third tour of Iraq in 2009 or 8, my ex-wife, my now ex-wife is like, hey, we've done this Iraq thing, and I had to make a conscious decision because if I'd stayed in the Army, got promoted to full colonel, that's 4 more years. It was at least in their combat tour. So for me at that point, I kind of felt I'd done my duty. My body was broken, my brain was broken, my family was struggling. So for me, it was an easier decision to leave that second time and take a job. And so, yeah, I mean, it defined my life. I still try to serve where I can. That's why I did the company helping veterans. That's why I do what I do today. I'm in politics now. I feel like I'm still fighting for my democracy in some way.
Yeah.
And actually, so bringing that up,
these are all long answers. Sorry about the long answers, by the way.
No, you're good. You're good.
Bringing that up, let's talk about your podcast. What is the name of your podcast, and what is it about?
Yeah, I kind of stumbled into podcasts. It's kind of funny because my son, my 25-year-old, likes to bust my balls about it because I used to make fun of podcasting. I go, "What's more cliche, Esteban, than a middle-aged white guy at the podcast?" I kind of fell into politics. It goes to my political career, which we didn't really get to. So I closed my firm down to the pandemic. I ran a COVID field hospital in New York, which is a story. And came back from that, decided to close my company down and wanted to find a new direction in my life. I got sucked into a thing called the Lincoln Project, which was formed by a bunch of former Republicans, anti-Trump.
We love the Lincoln Project.
Yeah. Well, Steve, it's funny. I had met Steve Schmidt in Iraq when he was working for Vice President Cheney.
Really?
He came over to Iraq on a visit. I ended up hooking up with him. I actually talked him into having Vice President Cheney visit. It was crazy. He showed up. Vice President Cheney showed up one day at our unit. I'm like, oh, that's a twist. Yeah, it's a story. Wow, craziest fucking thing. Anyway, so I stayed in touch with Schmidt. We did work together when I was a veterans advocate, and so when I closed ScoutCom, he reached out to me, and there was news stories about me running this hospital. It's a thing. Anyway, so Steve and I talked. I told him what's coming, and I called him after I closed my company. He says, "Look, come work for us." One of our pillars of the Lincoln Project was the veteran and military community, convincing those who serve in the military and the veterans that Donald Trump should not be given a second chance to be commander in chief, that the values that we uphold are not values he shared. And so that was my mission. So I took on that job, and I think we did well. And then after the election, I became the executive director, just in time for things to go crazy. So I managed the crisis there, which was high adventure. I only went to the hospital once, and then when that was done, kind of run its course, I got involved in politics, campaigns. So I helped a guy named Marcus Flowers run against Marjorie Taylor Greene down in Georgia and some others. And I got reached out to by a group, said, "Hey, you want to start a podcast?" I'm like, "No, why?" "Well, we'll pay you." I'm like, "Oh, now you're talking, okay." And you want to pay me? Sure. And so I started the podcast. I got the idea called On Democracy because I really just wanted to have conversations with people who are fighting for our democracy in some way, be it politicians, be it activists like me, be it journalists, media critics, people like David Hogg, the Parkland survivor, people like a woman named Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who's an expert in fascism. Just had these conversations. I was very blessed because of my work with Lincoln Project to have a pretty damn good Rolodex. You know what I mean? I mean, I did an ad with Alex Vindman. Well, the Vindmans are dear friends of mine, but Alex Vindman, Sully Sullenberger did an ad for us. I did an ad with Mark Hamill. I actually wrote an ad for Mark Hamill, which was so fucking surreal. The idea of writing words and then Mark Hamill reading them. And one of the most surreal experiences of my life was, it was amazing having Luke Skywalker read a script I wrote. So I was able to, kind of bring us some pretty good guests, Bill Crystal and pretty famous people. And so that's what I did. So On Democracy was born. And that deal I had, that organization was kind of a mess. So it went away. And then I said to myself, let's do this. Let's keep doing this on our own. I hired a studio and I do it on video in a studio. And about 5-6 months ago, I got the idea to reach out to the Midas Touch guys. The brothers, Ben, Brett, and Jordy Meiselas are incredibly young men who had started their project right at the same time as the Lincoln Project. And I had partnered with them. I had actually helped them. We worked together during the campaign and the Georgia runoff. I actually gave them some money to get door knockers and canvassers out for Raphael Warnock and Ossoff. And anyway, so I reached out to the boys and said, hey, I've got this podcast. It's different than the rest of your stuff. It's like a TV show. What do you think? And damn, they didn't run it and got like 100,000 views. That's a hit. I'm like, okay. Yeah. But the Midas Touch Network has over 1.5 million subscribers now. It's one of the fastest growing alternative news networks in the country. And so my show is on there. I'm real proud to be part of it. On Democracy's, I do have the On Democracy podcast on YouTube, but most of I feed it to them, and it does real well. The Midas Mighty, we call them. The fans are incredible. It's fun to be able to do it. It's fun to do a show. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, I was a Lincoln Project guy. I had at one point there was somebody, I know who it was. I won't say. Jared Kushner. Sending mailers. They blanketed me and the co-founders' entire zip codes with mailers calling us pedophiles, calling us crooks, about 4 in a row. So literally everybody in my zip code, I lived in Richmond, Virginia. Everyone in Richmond, Virginia got a mailer calling me a PO. So that was awesome, which is why it's like, send me your negative comments. I don't care. But it's cool being in the Midas Touch Network because I never get called a pedo. And they're real good folks. I mean, some of my shows get 2,000 or 3,000 comments, and I try to answer them all. I try to make it interactive. The new show actually will broadcast tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern. I'm the Friday night guy every Friday night, 11 Eastern.
Oh, great.
All right, everybody.
And I try to stay up for it. Like, it's not live. I record in the studio. But I stay up and answer people's questions in the comments, and because I just love my fans. You guys get it. Look at your fan base who's chiming in. You know them by name. You know Vita by name, and you know Paul by name. I just love that. I've got my regular fans, and so I'm very, very happy. And On Democracy, we're asking hard questions. We don't pull punches. I'm not a resistor, so I'm not very critical, but I will call out the Biden administration when I feel like we're doing something wrong. But by the same token, I believe that we're in a fight for our democracy, and there is a side that is against that. And there's a side that is, and so I'd love to argue tax policy someday again, but right now I got to worry about our democracy.
I do have a question, Esteban, if you don't mind, that I'm dying to ask. Okay, I've been wanting to ask somebody in the know, and you obviously are in the know.
Well, let's not get
I believe our democracy is currently being tested.
Yes.
Do you believe that if we can vote correctly in the next election, that our democracy could come out stronger than ever?
Yes. Yes. Vote. Yeah, I do believe that. I do believe that there is a opportunity for us to push the MAGA movement back to where it belongs. I believe the Republican Party, that is the party, is not the party I was a member of my entire adult life until about 6 years ago, has lost itself a little bit. And so I do believe the most powerful tool in the toolbox is voting. Having said that, the key to that is activism. The key is registering your friends to vote. The key is getting them out to vote. The key is voting the very first day of early voting. Early voting starts today in Virginia. If you're a Virginian, if you haven't voted yet, I'm mad at you. Go vote. You got 6 weeks.
That's right.
But vote early. And here's the thing. If you vote early, that means that you're helping the people you support, the campaign, because now you're off there, get out the vote roll. And they're not going to waste money trying to convince you to vote because you're off. That's right. And you can tell all your friends you voted, do a little social pressure. Like, hey, I voted early. Why haven't you got voted? We do better when we vote early. So take advantage of these opportunities, but, be active, write postcards for candidates you support. If you can afford to give a little money, give a little money. There's an opportunity for us to save our democracy, and it's up to us. There's some very dangerous things happening, and we have to call them out. When you have duly elected prosecutors just being fired because of their politics, that's a very scary place. When a party has decided they just disagree with your policies, they're going to fire you from your elected office. That's a scary place, and that's where we are right now.
It's fascism. It's dictatorship.
You see the difference between Democrats and Republicans. It was just announced today that Bob Melendez, senator of New Jersey, and his wife has been indicted on bribery charges. And it took 3-4 hours before the Democratic governor of New Jersey asked for his resignation.
Yep.
I think I tweeted almost immediately because I'm like, oh my God, why can't the Republicans do that? Okay.
Breaking the law, breaking laws. George Santos is still in office. George Santos is on multiple indictments, and he's still a member in good standing. That's insanity. It's insanity, and we've lost. Look at the Paxton thing in Texas. He broke the law. Yes. And the only reason he's still there is because Trump and his people pressured these guys. Say, hey, if you vote against him, I'm going to kick you out of office. It's like we've stepped through a looking glass where the rule of law is, based on what party you're a member of.
Dystopia.
You're right. Yeah, we've all said all along. Look, if you break the law, you're out. I don't care what party you are, but
Esteban, Paul has a comment that I think we absolutely have to display for him.
All right, Paul, what you got?
Now, just so you know, Paul has written a book called.
Okay.
This is Paul's book, The Red Herring Effect. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
Look it up. Yeah. So Paul's.
All right, cool.
A lot of good stuff. He has.
Send me some info.
All kinds of stuff. Absolutely.
My DMs are open. I'm still on Twitter. I'm dead naming it Twitter, so I don't call it X. But FP Wellman on Twitter. My DMs are open on Twitter. That's how Jeremy got hold of it. It was Instagram, one or the other.
Yep, Instagram.
Paul is an intellectual god. He is a walking.
And I'm FP Wellman official on most channels, Instagram and Threads.
The information that he has in his head is overwhelming. He can tell you about anything. Tax related laws, codes.
I'm not that guy.
Me and him did an episode. I'm sorry. Me and him did an episode just recently on his podcast about Project 2025.
Yeah.
And he read all 900 pages of it. I mean, he's that guy. Like
I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. I rely on smarter people than me. I'm a strategist. I'm a comms guy.
All right. Okay. So someone else had just asked, I think this was Gail Dempster, was it hard for you to transition from military life to civilian life?
No, question. No, honestly, it wasn't. I told you guys I barely fit in the Army, right? So I loved it, man. I got to sleep in, I have to run every day. I fucking hated running. So it goes different for different people. My ex-wife dated a guy recently, and he was having a really hard time. Some of us have a different approach to it, intellectually. But it's funny. Both times I quit, it was really pretty smooth. I mean, look, I have a joke I used to use all the time. If you've met a veteran, you've met one veteran. Every experiences vary, and so I was very fortunate that I had a very good support network. I had a very supportive wife, lovely human being. We're still best friends, even though we're divorced. I had a very good, that said, hey, you want to do it, you do it. And by the way, when I decided to go back in the Army, after getting pretty comfortable, I was running for mayor of Peachtree City, Georgia. But my wife at the time said, there's going to be a war, right? Yeah. I said, yeah. She's like, I know you're going to want to fight. I said, yeah, that's what I do. I'm a soldier. It's like, great. Do what you got to do. We'll support you. So for me, I was very fortunate. I had that kind of a support network that said, all right, let's take that risk. Let's get out. Let's find a job. And I have faith you will do that. So my transitions, both of them were fairly smooth. Especially the retirement. I mean, come on, I had a great set. I mean, look at me. Look at the privilege. Like, let's be very honest about the privilege that I have, gentlemen. I went to West Point, okay, top public university in the country. And then General Petraeus got the idea I should go to Harvard. So I went to Harvard on a full ride scholarship and graduate with honors. Okay. So again, all while serving in uniform. So I have a unique set of privileges that not every veteran has, as Jeremy mentions. Most of them, my son didn't have this kind of privileges. So I have a very, I'm very cognizant of the privileges that I was able to gain through the unique experience I had, and I try to make sure I pay that forward and understand that. But that's why I kind of scoffed. You guys couldn't see me on camera when you talk about me as a hero. Like, my guys served, had incredible soldiers I worked with, had some incredible opportunities. I was able to make the most of those opportunities. I saw some shit, but I had a very good experience in the military. But you couldn't drag me back into it again now.
I actually like that question because I watched my father struggle. I mean, like you said, the military's changed. I watched my father struggle with the transition.
Well, some guys, they just can't let it go. It ends up being a big part of your person. That's fine. I tease a lot of those guys because they're still, guys, especially Marines, the worst. It's a cult. It's very hard to let go. My dad, 30 years after being out, my dad still called it the deck and the head. I'm like, Dad, it's a house. Jesus, it's a bathroom on the floor. Some of us are, But for me, I'd always, like I said, I was told at West Point, you don't fit in. I didn't. And it was the loveliest advice I got from an officer. This later advice. He said, listen to me, Fred, you have to understand something about the Army. First of all, the Army is great because it's the biggest service. And because it's the biggest service, we have room for people who don't fit. And we need them. That's how I ended up working for General Petraeus. General Petraeus was this unique officer who recognized he needed people around him who told him like it was. He needed people in his inner circle who were like, I know we've been doing that way 200 years, sir, but can we do it different? I think that's stupid. Why have we been doing that for 200 years? It is, it's 2006, why are we doing that? And that's how I was. I mean, and I wasn't afraid to tell. My favorite one, I'll tell another war story again. I'm never gonna get the end of this, and I do have to go. But one day I'm in Iraq, and I was the spokesman for this command training Iraqi security forces. And this General Dan Bolger, he's a great guy, but he's intimidating as hell. And Bolger walks to me and says, Fred, I'm going to save you. I know the 3-star was mad at me about something. Who knows? Probably because I said no. Anyways, General Bolger's like, Fred, we're rolling out these Iraqi Humvees with radios on them. It's this new radio we're giving them. I'm like, that's great. Because I want you to fly the media up to Taji. We're going to do a show. We're going to show them how these new radios and how great they're. I said, that's amazing, sir. How many vehicles do Iraqis have? He's like, I think 18,000. That's fantastic. 18,000 vehicles. That's incredible. How many radios have we installed? He goes, this will be 2,000. I'm like, oh, okay. So they have 16,000 vehicles without radios in it. He's like, what do you mean? I said, because that's the first thing the media is going to say, sir. I said, you want me to put them on a helicopter, fly them to a place they could get shot down flying there so they can watch radios. I said, nah, if you want to do it, sir, but it sounds really bad. And he's like, sorry, the language. He goes, fuck you, Wellman. He walks out. So that was that guy. I was that guy. I used to joke. I used to tell that general, I said, no, it's Fred, sir. It's not fuck you, it's Fred. I know you think it is. You think my name is fuck you, Wellman, but it's actually Fred. I was that guy, and I was lucky to be in a service that welcomed that. And they told me, they said, you're going to make lieutenant colonel. You'll have a 20-year career. You won't be a general. And guess what? What do you know? I did 20 years and got out. And it's fine. I had a very successful military career. Guys, I sat in one time, Secretary Rumsfeld came over to visit. This is when they were thinking about the next phase.
Name drop.
2006.
I know. I just can't believe it. Yes.
2006. So he comes over, and I was working for John Dempsey at the time. And Dempsey has me come to this meeting at the palace in the Green Zone. He says, hey, come over just in case the media is with him. All right. So I come over and there's no media and they was literally, he'd brought all the undersecretaries. They were literally going to talk with top 3 generals in Iraq about what happens next in 2006. And I'm getting ready. All right, leave. So he goes, why don't you come in? All right. So me and one other officer, one other lieutenant colonel, 2 not junior, but mid-grade officers, were the only ones sitting there. And we sat there and here they're talking. Here's the Secretary of Defense, all the undersecretaries, all these famous Paul Wolfowitz, these famous people. Here's all the generals, and then me and this other asshole. And we're both sitting there. At one point, Kyle looked at us like, "Why are we here?" I flew into Desert Storm on day 1. Vehicles as far as the eye can see, rushing north, the great rush into Iraq for Desert Storm. I didn't have a phone camera then. I wish I did, but American vehicles streaming into a country, an invasion force like we hadn't seen in the modern era. We hadn't seen an invasion like that since Korea. And here I am flying over it. I have seen history and been a part of it. That's such a blessing.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, my father went to the desert. My dad was in Desert Storm as well.
Yeah.
He was a sergeant, E7, sergeant first class in the Army, a combat engineer.
Great job in that war.
Yeah.
I want to ask one last question from our member, and then that will be it.
Okay.
And that question is: do you think we're heading for war with Russia or China?
Great question. No. I know that's the cool thing to say right now. Russia has overextended itself greatly in Ukraine. What we're doing in Ukraine by helping the Ukrainians fight this war is it'll go down in history as one of the most cost-effective ways that an enemy was dismantled. Putin has killed himself in many ways. And frankly, between you and me, I think he's literally going to get himself killed in the next couple of years. Just he's dismantled everything he gained as the leader of Russia to bring them back to being a superpower has been frittered away through his ego attacking a smaller country he thought would be a tipper. And what have we done? Not one single American life has been lost. Well, I mean, officially, we've had some of my peers who have fought, but we've become the arsenal for democracy. We have helped them fight for their freedom, and we have dismantled the Russian bear. China is an interesting case. China's in the cusp right now. There's really good belief, and I know it's not a popular opinion to have right now, but I think China's in trouble. And I believe that because they have overextended. There was always a tipping point with China where a controlled capitalist economy could only be controlled for so long. And so on top of that, the issues they have with population. Now, look, they're a threat. They are building unique technologies. They are uniquely duplicitous in their intelligence gathering and the things they do to undermine us internationally. But I don't think we'll see a hot war with China, at least not in my lifetime. But I've been wrong before. By the same token, I remember saying to my boss in 1990 that I wanted to go to a light infantry division, like the 7th ID, because the days of massive tank wars were over. And 6 months later, I was in a massive tank war. so I'm not exactly the best prognosticator, I think, And I remember flying into Iraq over all those tanks thinking, God, what a dumbass I was 6 months ago.
That's great.
All right. Fred, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise,
meeting you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and it's been a pleasure having you on the Esteban Hour podcast. Thank you so much for sitting down and sharing some of your experiences, sharing your background and your opinions with us. We are more than grateful. Thank you for engaging with our audience and our followers as well.
Sign up for the Come Watch on Democracy, FP1 and Substack. I'd love to have you.
And I'll put this one up as the last one. You got some hearts here.
Oh man, the best kind. Thank you, man.
There you go.
I love it. Like I said, I love it. I live for positive reinforcement. I think it's probably my PTSD.
Absolutely. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep working on your podcast. Keep fighting for democracy. Keep your upkeep on your excellent contribution with the Midas Touch Network. Please send them our hellos as well. And again, just thank you for being a hero of America, and thank you for being the type of person that you are.
Thank you. That's really nice. Good hanging with you guys. It's been just a real joy getting to know you. I appreciate what you're doing too. Keep up the fight.
You got it.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it too.
Yeah, mine too. It's been fun, Jeremy. Thank you.
So this has been quite of an experience for me. I can speak for Jeremy as well, for him as well. We love the guys over at the Midas Touch Network. Again, we thank Fred for coming on and blessing us with his presence. But a lot of what he said is food for thought. Okay, the military is a special place. Not everyone can make it in, and not everyone makes it out. And those that do have the opportunity to make it in and make it out, those are America's heroes. And that's why we emphasize that tonight with Fred, as well as anyone can be all you can be, as they say it, right? Anyone can do that. Anyone can go to college. Anyone can be on a podcast. Anyone can do anything that they want, as long as they put their minds to it. And in this case, we're speaking to young men, A lot of the Gen Zs today that don't feel that perhaps life is worth it. Perhaps they're wrapped into the political warfare that's going on, the economic warfare that's going on. But just look at the higher generation and how they got to where they got to, as well as the many frustrations and obstacles that they had to go through. Fred mentioned a lot of military stories, both good and bad. That's what makes you stronger. That's what helps you move on to the next phase of the goods and the bads, not giving up. If you give up, you won't have any stories to tell. You won't have anything to build your strength and your encouragement on. So that is my final thoughts for today. Stay tuned for the Esteban Hours Week in Review, which airs every Monday at 11 a.m. We will be back here for the Esteban Hour podcast next Friday at 8 p.m. I love you all. I thank you for watching and joining us tonight. Please follow, like, and share this broadcast, as well as the Esteban Hour podcast. It is greatly appreciated. And I wish everyone all around the world a lovely and safe weekend. If you have a goal that you have accomplished or achieved today, don't forget to say to yourself, this is how we do it.